My name's Steve Mitchell. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be here, I think. I tell you, it's kind of like Christmas or something. I have a lot of rapid-fire thoughts going on. I see people. There's a lot of people in this room I've got a deep, rich history with. We got a guy in this room. Did I say my name? We got a guy in this room. I gave him his first job. He was the first convict I recruited for an inmate leadership job when I got to the prison system in 1989. And promoted him 2 or 3 times over the years, and then eventually hired him into the system as a state employee. Tom Ivester was in charge at that time. Even with that, we had a terrible time getting him. Had to go through the Secretary of Correction. Nobody else would let him in. And spent about 15 years in the state violating every policy known to man to help him get educated. And today, he's a professor at East Carolina University. One of my favorite people in the whole world. Sobriety date's May 26, 1975, and got my cake last night at my home group. It's not as big a circus as it was last year. I was about ready for a mental institution last year at this time. Which I am a former ping pong champion, VA psych ward. Get that out of the way. That's true. It's true. I only lost 1 game in the psych ward of ping pong, and I immediately had my headband sent in and remained defeated after that. I was probably the only one in there wasn't on Thorazine. But anyway, a lot of misfiring parts, and the best I can remember, it's anybody that's been through it, it's splotchy. But 51 years ago, right now, today, I'm about 3 days away from a drink, and I think that's when the big trouble started. It was like today or tomorrow. And it was in the middle of the night in Dodge County, out in the country. There's little towns around there, a few miles, but on a farm. And it's the middle of the night, and I'm hearing things, which a lot of which ain't there, but nevertheless, I'm hearing them. If you've ever been through that, it's pretty scary. My sister got up in the middle of the night and had a baby already, and I think she was big pregnant with another baby. Had a husband, of course. I mean, I don't know. I would have thought he'd have got tired of that. But she took me to town. They put me in a motel. A guy from AA came out there, and I remember walking around in that motel, and I had real long hair, and I'd walk around in there, and I'd see it on the wall. And whenever I would, I'd go like that. I had it in my head that my heart was going to explode. And every time I'd lay down, I'd think I was going to have a heart attack. But anyway, obviously I survived that. And a few days later, I went to live with my great aunt. So the rest is history. I'd be dead if it wasn't for her. There's no doubt about that. I was half dead when I got here. I was hemorrhaging blood. I was vomiting blood. I was going to the bathroom blood. Feet were all swollen up. I was 25, almost 26 years old, and actually I was put into AA by a couple people from Bill's Bar. I know there's people in here. I'm going to try. Peter Wilkins always asked, he didn't do it tonight, but he'll say, are you going into Bill's Bar tonight? Well, the problem with that, going into Bill's Bar, it's hard to get out of there. Hey, figuratively and literally. But anyway, 2 people from Bill's, Alcoholics Anonymous would be a very different place if some of the people who got us in here would have got in here themselves. Because Libby and her boyfriend her boyfriend was a bull hauler. In Nebraska, they used to slaughter more hogs than pigs than any place in the country, and the bull haulers carried them to 48 states and Canada, and her boyfriend was a bull hauler and bad drunk. He wrote me a letter when I was in the state hospital. I'm sure Libby made him write me a letter, but he said that the way things were going for a while, he thought he possibly could have been an alcoholic, but he found out he wasn't. If he wasn't, there's no such thing. Libby was my friend, but I met Sal through her, and they actually intervened and got somebody from Alcoholics Anonymous to come and talk to me. But Libby told me that I knew she wasn't going to marry Sal. She changed men about like you change clothes. But he drug her across the river over to Iowa to meet his mom. And Libby told me that when Sal got up and went to the bathroom, his mom called him into the kitchen and said, "Honey, I'm going to give you some advice. You need to get away from that drunken bum as quick as you can. He'll ruin your life." Now, that's his mom talking. So you know it's a rough bunch. But anyway, Bill's Bar was a bar where everybody in there needed to be in AA. You ever seen a bar like that? I don't know. I know people get, without any trouble, get respectfully drunk in North Carolina, but there's probably 15 bars in Nebraska to every bar in North Carolina. So, but the people in here, I have a rich history with some people. I was here in January when Jerry Weaver, was telling his story, and he was talking about, he said from the podium, him and me used to live together, and I said, not very long. It just popped out, but it was long enough that I don't think this is what happened in the first few days of 1994. We had a new house on the country club. We'd been in North Carolina since 1989. I came here. Tom Ivester brought me here to work in the prison system, and so I just left. I always wondered, if we get divorced, how are we ever going to get these kids educated? What are people going to think? How are we going to be able to pay for 2 households? But that night, I had this old beat-up Sentra, and the driveway had a bit of a decline, and when I backed that thing down there, all that was gone. I said, this is over with. There will not be any more of this. I remember thinking, I may never get laid again. I mean, I guess I can say that. We know everybody in here. Or it may happen yet tonight. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know this ain't going to happen again. And I went to I was sponsoring a college professor at that time. Folks from the principal's group of Wilson knew him well. Tom Marshall, he's gone now. It was 30 years at Barton College. So I went to his house, him and his wife. I stayed there that night, and I don't think I asked Jerry. I think Reed did. I think I'll have to ask them after the meeting, but I think Reed talked to Jerry, and Jerry called me and said, "I'm lonely out here," which I'm sure wasn't true. My main job when I lived with him was fielding the phone for all the women that were after him. I mean, merciful Jesus, man. I mean, they're coming at you at point blank range. Yes, they had a cell phone or not cell phone, but it had a cord on the wall. So I went out there, and the thing I remember about that is how that's a family, like any family. I sponsored his uncle for years, so I heard his uncle's 5th steps. Plus, I've known him ever since he's been sober. So they had a lot of trouble in that family, like any family, but when I got there, I already knew his mom. The thing I always remember, his dad came over with some pizzas to his mom's house. Now, they didn't live together. They were divorced, but his dad came over there with some pizzas, and it was just like, they eat, I eat. I remember his dad, I'd never met his dad. His dad called me by name before he was introduced to me, so he knew I was coming. But I was just factored in. And I mean, I've just been, so many experiences with people in this room that it's just amazing. I saw Sandy through her master's degree. That's another miraculous happening. You know, Sandy. Sandy called me one day and said she was going to start working on her PhD. I said, no, you ain't. She said, why not? I said, you just about had both of us in the mental institution with that master's degree. I mean, but people in this room, I can't tell you how many, I had money. I've never been without money. I've always had a morbid reaction to money. My wife I have today, 20-some years now, said, I've never seen anybody with a relationship with money like you. You don't want anything. She tried to get me to buy a Mercedes a few years ago. I said, Julie, I don't want a Mercedes. She's on her 3rd new Audi while I'm driving my 2013 Accord. But I don't, she said, you don't want anything. You just want the money. Well, that's right. I'm afraid something's going to happen. I mean, I don't know what it is. Years ago, a guy told me, he said, well, man, he says, the way things are going now, he said, your kids got it if anything happens, which is true. So anyway, it's just been, Jerry and Reed were at both of my kids' graduations. They were at White's wedding. I think Reed was tracking my ex-wife's drinks at the wedding. She's drank herself into her element going out. So that's the update of that. Stay with that bottle long enough, you'll become a vegetable. But anyway, deep relationships with people that have saved the day time after time after time. Here, just, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, Kevin said, would you like to be my guest for a night on the Hurricanes? He's a huge Hurricane fan. I said, yeah, I sure would. You're paying for everything, I'm thinking. Which is true. He did. I think we went in that, is that a Cadillac we went in, Kevin? Yeah, we went in the Cadillac. But anyway, on the way in, he said, Hurricanes are giving everybody a gift tonight for attending this, but he said, my daughter wants the gift that they're going to give to you. I said, oh, that's fine with me. But he said, I got another gift for you, when he did. So I'm going to get out of all this and get on with this in a minute. But we sat next to a couple guys, just young men. A couple young men, I don't know, 25, 30 years old, and they were drinking beer. So they got up to go get another beer run, and the guy says to me, he said, I'm going to buy you a beer. I said, no, I don't want a beer. He said, yeah, I'm going to bring you a beer. I said, hold off, man. I said, you don't want me drinking. So anyway, long story short, I showed him my medallion. He said, I'm going to take a picture of that thing. Turns out he had a drunken uncle that's now 25 years sober, and a guy he works with is sober 40 years. So he texted a picture of that, and the guy with 40 years said he'd never heard of such a thing. So I think the guy must be living an awful sheltered AA life. He never heard of anybody with that one. So anyway, I'll say this, is trying to get started. Alcohol did the same thing for me. I think it's one of the designs unwritten. This is reading between the lines in AA literature. I think one of the designs of Alcoholics Anonymous is to do the same stuff for us slowly that booze did quick. Right? A 6-pack of beer and a couple shots will get you downtown right now. I've been so nervous I couldn't sit on a chair and get a few drinks to stick, and I was just fine. Well, Alcoholics Anonymous is more powerful. In fact, that's what I would say if somebody asked me what alcoholism was, and not to use anything that the book says, I would say it means I can't live with drinking and I can't live without drinking. And if you don't think that's reality, you're not watching very quick. Because well, I think we'd all agree that alcoholism is an abnormal reaction to alcohol. It's also an abnormal reaction to abstinence. Percentage-wise, the majority of alcoholics commit suicide do that sober. I didn't have any problems when I was drinking. A lot of the times I didn't even know I was there. I mean, other people had problems. Sometimes I did, but a lot of times I wasn't aware of them. They were going on now. And then if somebody asked me what Alcoholics Anonymous was, I'd say if practiced as a way of life, it's more powerful than the illness of alcoholism. But it's also slower. It's slower. The trajectory is slow. So the truth of the matter is I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, 25, almost 26 years old, more dead than alive, on a dead run from what I had. And it's literally a fact that I came to AA more running away from what I had than I came running towards Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know that. There was no way for me to know it at the time, but the truth of the matter is what that did is that made me just right for Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I had it in my head that I either wanted to die or find some way out. That makes you just right for Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, people can say whatever they want in AA. If you're going to very many meetings, you don't need me to tell you that. You already hear that. But I hate to hear people say that now that they're in AA, they have a choice whether to drink or not. I can't imagine what kind of alcoholic would have a choice to drink, wouldn't drink. I mean, of course you'd drink. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you got a choice, but I mean, about like pulling a gun on yourself and seeing if it'll shoot you. You know, that's about the choice. And I watched a guy one time, I don't think they have this flight anymore, but there used to be a straight flight from RDU to Hartford, Connecticut. And sometimes I'd get bumped to it because the American Airlines was for whatever reason. I watched a guy one time with a drink. He had a drink from as soon as he could get it when we got going, and he was finishing it when we pulled into Hartford, and it's 700 and some air miles. And he had it was in a regular looking glass, and he had something in there, some little trinket in there, like a parachute or something to stir it. And every so often he'd pick it up and smell it. put it back down and take a little sip off of it. And after about 200 miles, I'm getting nervous. I mean, I don't want to drink, but I'm thinking to myself, man, drink that thing or dump it out. Do something with it. I mean, it's going to be warm pretty quick. That stuff stays with us a long time. I grew up in alcoholism. I've always known there was something wrong with me. I started school when I was 4 years old. They thought I was a boy wonder because I can read really well. I watched my kids who were, God almighty, they're 48 and 49 this summer. I watched my grandchildren all learn how to read. I think the last grandchild's 15 now, so they've all been reading for a long time. Best I can tell, I never learned how to read. I just knew how to read. I knew how to read really good, out loud or to myself. I often knew what words were that I didn't know how I knew that, so they thought I was really smart. Now, stick with me on this. They were disabused of that idea pretty quick, but I went to a little elementary school, Grant Elementary School in Fremont, Nebraska. It's a town of about 25,000 people. Now, this story I'm going to tell you that happened to me, these people were not adversarial. Both of these old ladies, the principal of that school and my fourth grade teacher, were institutions in that town. They'd given their whole life to little kids' education. But they introduced a thing in fourth grade called long division. And they might as well have been talking to me in Russian. And it turned, my wife learned about this. I remember when she learned about it when she was getting a teacher's certificate years later. She'd been working in all the schools, training teachers, and she decided to get a teacher's certificate to actually teach school. And in gifted education, she learned that a lot of times the people that are doing pretty well, and then they get in front of something they can't learn because of some kind of learning disability, the teachers don't believe them. Well, that's what happened. They wanted to know why I wouldn't do that long division. I wanted to know that too. I mean, and then and there's all kinds of stuff looking back. You know that saying caught a few years ago about life is lived forward, but it's understood backward? Well, all kinds of things. And I remember I had a lot of trouble learning how to tie my shoes. I had to learn some different way. I had to memorize how to do it. It didn't make sense to me. I never have learned how to do long division. I've gotten kind of arrogant about it, to tell you the truth. I wonder why anybody would want to do it. I sponsor a chemist, and they have to do a lot of stuff with math and all of that stuff. And I asked him, what's the big deal about it? We're supposed to be falling behind China and all these places with math. I said, what do you need it for? I mean, it's a good question. They got some way of doing it all now anyway. But and they said, I took care of a pretty large budget in the Department of Correction. I'll assure you I never used any long division to do it. So, I mean, anyway, I just went on, and it was confusing to me. I said in alcoholism, the first thing I noticed when I was a child, I noticed this very young age, I guess the two trajectories that have dominated my life have been fear and anger or resentment. And both of them have to do with some time other than right now, as a rule. I'm either angry or about something that happened in the past, or I'm afraid of something that's going to happen or not going to happen in the future. So anyway, I had a tough time in school. I was a problem child. I was pretty good at sports. I was a small market, 25,000. It's different than now. Everybody got to play. I had three things happen about the same time that will shut you down as far as sports are concerned. I quit growing, I got a bad attitude, and I started drinking. you can't win all those. But I'm learning things now at this point. The first time I got drunk outside of my home, my dad was a horrible alcoholic, bad alcoholic as I've ever known or ever run into. He hated AA from the first time they shoved him in there until the last time. In fact, he made this rather bizarre statement. He said, if anything would make a man drink, AA would do it. And then he said, I never have been able to figure out why Steve had so much trouble quitting drinking. He said, I never did. Well, he never quit. But anyway, so I was growing up and all that, but the first thing I realized when I looked around is that things weren't the way people were telling me they were. I put together that I had an aunt who lived in Omaha, was married, had an uncle to me and kids, was having an affair. Most people in here are too young to remember, but they used to say, watch out for the milkman. Kind of like Jody in Vietnam. Don't worry about you, the gay male. Jody's taking care of your wife. Or your girlfriend. That's all over the world. Jody's, I don't know how he got so famous, but it used to be about the milk. Jody's real now. That may not be his name, but there's plenty of Jodys around. But they watch out for the milkman. Well, my aunt was creeping with the milkman. And years later, one of my drunken uncles, he was there with a flashlight. He confirmed that it was true. So I was figuring all this stuff out. So the first time I got drunk outside of my home, I was 15 years old. And my life changed, was to never be the same again. At that time, you could buy 3 quarts of Old Milwaukee or 3 quarts of Falstaff for $1. Pretty rancid stuff, but, you know, 15-year-old kid drinking beer on a country road, you ain't exactly drinking for taste, you know. So, but my life just took off. You know, I got my first older woman. I was a bellboy at the Pathfinder Hotel. You remember those old crank elevators? If you drive it too far, it'll stick in the top. If you drive it too far on the bottom, I had the keys to where all the alcohol was, so I could steal as much liquor and she said she was 18 and came in from the farm to look for a job. I don't know how old she was. It's been a long time since she'd seen 18. I'll tell you this, though. It's been a long time ago, and I can remember that like it was yesterday. Now, that's if you ever want to know, it says in our book that most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled to quit drinking. That's why. That's the reason. Here you have a 15-year-old child on lockjaw. I couldn't get through my own name in an introduction. Talking to a girl, I got the keys to the kingdom. I end up in bed with a full-grown, blown woman, and you think I'm going to quit drinking? I mean, that don't even make sense to a non-alcoholic. So I just took off, and you know, I got in a lot of trouble. I was sponsoring a special operations soldier. He's left now, but he told me they're putting people out at Fort Bragg with 7 and 18 years of military service on their first offense DWI. And so I'd have never made it through them. I'd have never got in the military the way it was, if that was the way it was now. But a very dishonest recruiter got me into the military, took my money. I know he just put it in his pocket. He said, what he told me is he was going to give it to one of the detectives at the police station. The only part of the story that I knew that was true, there was a detective at the police station who was a retired Navy recruiter. And what he said he was going to do was give it to him, and he would throw the records away or whatever. He just stuck it in his pocket. That's what he did. But anyway, I'm barely old enough to get in there. They sent my friend to prison. They let me go in the military. And I just told you I can't fix anything. Aaron's not here this year. I think Jerry's the only one here that's changed a flat tire for me. But I was telling that story last night. Jason Chatham laid out there in the gravel in shorts in the dark and changed a tire for me. I said, I'd be walking today if they'd left me to change. If I get a flat tire, I'm just down until somebody gets there. So I can't fix anything, but I get out of basic training, they send me to Wichita Falls, Texas to work on airplanes. I mean, just the insanity of that. And you got to wonder, anybody that's been in the military has been through some of this kind of stuff. They got us all together, we just got there. They had a talk that went something like this. They said, this weekend you're going to be allowed to go anywhere in Wichita Falls, Texas you want to, with the exception of Flood Street. You can't go down on Flood Street because it's off limits by order of the base commander. Well, you know what happened to me. I got drunk and went down on Flood Street, find out why they don't want you down there. And the next thing I know, I'm out of that school and I'm in Arkansas. And so I was in Arkansas a year, got arrested for minor in possession, public intoxication, and drunk driving, and got in some other trouble. So I saw myself off in January of 1970. I went off to Vietnam and stayed there 1 calendar year. And I came back from there in a lot more trouble than when I went. My alcoholism progressed. I'd been drinking in the morning for a long time. And I was in a lot of trouble by the time I came back from Vietnam. And so I stayed there 1 calendar year and got stationed in the state of Washington. And so I got there in February of 1971. So I was going to be there a year and a half till I got out of the military. Things happened there that to this day, I mean, I'm not sure all of what happened. I know I was at least a good bit responsible for the death of another person. And I know that I just kind of went on with my life and I shoved things to another area. And one of the things we all learn in AA, whether we put it in words or not, the more something's pushed down, the more vile it is when it comes back up. and that whatever you send out has to come back. If you send out trash, trash comes back. If you send out love, love comes back. So, but it's a bad law that doesn't work both ways. You know, the book Alcoholics Anonymous says that a resentment fancied or real has the power to actually kill. But the law works both ways. I don't have to help anybody. I'm not powerful enough to help anybody. I have to try to help people. So I get the same benefit whether they get anything out of it or not. Whether they're living the good life like Mickey D and they're a professor now, or whether they die in the ghetto. I get the same thing out of it. So the spiritual life is a funny thing. There was a very kind doctor. Jim Rounder looked him up one time and found out where he was. Believe it or not, I was very late. This guy anybody that's been in the military knows about the chaplains having a lot of power. Doctors have a lot of power too. There was a very kind doctor. He was an ENT surgeon that kept me from getting kicked out of the military single-handedly. Did a lot of stuff for me, and I finally, Jim Rounder chased him down. He found him in a book, and Dr. Viggy was in St. Charles, Missouri. And I actually made amends to him. He's dead now, and I'm glad I got that handled. I was sober a good 20 years before I did that. And made contact with his granddaughter. I called out there a couple Christmases ago, and I got somebody on the phone, and I said, do you know, called the clinic, and I didn't know he was dead. I said, do you know Dr. Viggy? And the woman on the phone said, I ought to know him. He's my grandpa. But he was gone by then. But his daughter now is the head of that, she's the head ENT doctor of that organization. But he kept me from getting kicked out of the military. So I got out of the military, one day less than 4 years, got an honorable discharge, never should have happened. And I got out of the military. 6 months after I got out of the military, I essentially became homeless. And stayed that way. Between the military and Alcoholics Anonymous was almost 3 years. I think August of 72, May of 75, yeah. I wasn't homeless every night, but I didn't have a home. Jim Holmes used to say that. Your mom's got a home, you ain't got one, you're homeless. That ain't yours. But anyway, so here's what happened when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. The longer I'm sober and the more, I guess the older I get and the longer I'm sober, the more I'm convinced that there's a part of alcoholism that we don't quite understand. I don't think anybody understands. It's a nasty, diabolical illness. Now, you don't have to know a lot about alcoholism. Information's overrated. That's one of the problems with treatment centers. They beat on you forever, teaching you stuff that's essentially banal chatter. I mean, what you really know about alcohol, what you need to know about alcoholism is if you're an alcoholic or not. That's what you need to know. Information ain't going to do much for you. What I needed was power, not information. You need to know a couple things. You need to know if you're drinking whiskey, you can't switch to beer, and if you're drunk on alcohol, you can't start smoking weed. You need to know those kind of things, but you can learn that pretty quick. What I needed was power. So when you look at the first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. Well, that's the entrance into the tent, but it's a tenuous place. When I'm dealing with somebody, I try to slam them through that pretty quick because it's hopeless. You ever look in the eyes of somebody, you'll see some of these times, you'll see somebody like this on a prison yard once in a while, and sometimes it's one of the personality boys with a lot of mouth, but not usually. But where you'll see these people is like in a rescue mission. When you look at somebody and their eyes are dead. Have you ever seen that? Like their heart's pumping, but they're dead. And the first thing they tell you is what they used to be. Every time. They'll say, like, you know, I was a paratrooper in Afghanistan, or they have a picture they want to show you of a niece or a child or something. Most of the time, if you research, that stuff is true. So this is just my take on this now. The biggest jump in the program that I understand is from the first step to the second step. Because from powerlessness and hopelessness, room temperature IQ will get you to the understanding that if powerlessness is the problem, then power is the answer, right? So the second step is where I access the power. And I didn't know that at the time. That trajectory moved in my life without me knowing it. I think it happened the first summer I was sober. I don't think I could have put it in words. But I think if is looking back on it, I think it came from two places. I think it came from listening in meetings and particularly speaker meetings. Experience, Strength, and Hope. There's just nothing quite like that. And then the other place I think it came from was Alcoholics Anonymous literature. You know, I try to remember that, you know, meetings proper, I've kind of rethought this, but I've been saying for years that in Alcoholics Anonymous we're over-identified with meetings. COVID got me to rethink that, but there's some truth in that. Meetings are one thing we do, but Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of life. So meetings proper are extremely important, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, if you say no identification, no 12 steps, then you could say right after that, no Alcoholics Anonymous. Because the steps are the banner happening of the whole thing. That's what reverses a killer illness. So here you have somebody walking off a cliff, dying with the illness of alcoholism. The steps ride into town and reverse that. Nothing else does that. This is just my take. I don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. But as far as I'm concerned, just me, there's two treatments for the illness of alcoholism. One of them's alcohol, the other one's Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, I've been so sick I couldn't hold my head up, get enough alcohol to stay down. I'm pretty good again. So alcohol is a treatment for alcoholism. Just you linger too long at the well, you ain't coming up from that. But the second step moved in my life that very first summer. I don't think I could have put it in words. I don't think I knew it was the second step, but I knew something was a little bit different. And as I look back on it now, it was hope. One night, outside of Chapter 5, in Fremont, Nebraska, if anybody's been there, there's bars up and down both sides of the main street. And Chapter 5 was where I got sober, it's still there today. It sits right between two bars. Didn't make any difference. I wasn't allowed to go in either one of them bars. But I was permanent party up the street. Phyllis had about 5 or 6 pets, that's what we were called. And if you were Bill himself, the guy that owned Bill's bar, made his fortune in the garbage and septic tank business. And he bought that bar for his drunken wife, Phyllis. But Phyllis had a law in that bar that if she threw you out herself, you never drank in her bar or bars again. If the help threw you out, you could get turned back on to drink. But if you were one of Phyllis's pets, you were exempt from being shut off. I was one of Phyllis's pets, so I could always drink in Bill's bar. But anyway, well, sitting on the car, sitting out in front of Chapter 5 one night with a guy I sobered up with. He was May 2nd, I was May 26th. We had the same sponsor. And we were sitting on the car. Now this guy, he just died. He's the last one that was there when I got sober, just died. He was almost 6 foot tall. He weighed 116 pounds. He looked like a prisoner of war. I gave him the name Big Harold. And I don't know what I must have looked like, but he said, when I saw you, I told my wife, there's one that's really hurting. But we were sitting on the hood of a car out in front of Chapter 5 about 10 o'clock at night. 8 o'clock was the normal time then for AA meetings. 7's the 8 o'clock now. But 8 o'clock at night, so we're sitting out there, it's probably 9:30, quarter to 10 at night. It's breezy kind of weather where you need a jacket or something. It's nice weather. And my friend looked over at me. I thought he was going to start crying. He didn't, but I thought he was going to start crying. He said, "Man, if this thing don't work, there ain't nothing." If you think about that, that's the truth. Zach at Principles likes to say, "I ain't got no plan B." If you look at Alcoholics Anonymous, we're the bottom feeders of life. Think about this. There's that statement. It's a great statement. I thought Bill Wilson made it, but apparently somebody else did it. They said that lest we forget, we should remember that Alcoholics Anonymous is a society made up of colossal failures transformed by the grace of a loving God. So we don't have any referral out of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're working with somebody that you refer somebody there, you expect them to come back. Like if you're working with somebody and you say you need to go get a medication check with your doctor. I think you're on too much medicine or something. Well, you expect them to come back. Or if you send them to talk to a clergyman or a doctor or whatever, a men's in another state, you expect them to come back. We don't have any place that say you're too bad for AA, go there. I mean, the next thing's the boneyard. I mean, there is nothing. So we have to take care of that. But anyway, that second step was the trajectory that moved me from hopeless to hope. And it's kind of like Vince Lombardi said, run towards the light. You know, if you look at alcoholism, I like to analogize alcoholism. Active alcoholism is dark, recovery is light. And alcoholism breeds itself in isolation, recovery breeds itself in community. That's what we're doing here tonight. That's why we get together. If you take alcohol out of this group here, our connectedness to alcohol, then we're just like any other group of confused people. No different. What we come together around is the illness of alcoholism. You know that statement in the book that says we've shared in a common peril? They're using the word peril for alcoholism. Bill Wilson had an English teacher that told him don't use the same words all the time. We've shared in the same peril, but it says it would never have held us together as we are now bound. What's held us together is the common solution. That's what we have to hang on to. So, Reed gave a long introduction, I know that. And plus we've got we've got some anniversaries, don't we? I'm gonna head for the home stretch on this. A lot to talk about. You know, there was actually a time with these podium calls, I used to worry about taking up the time. That's been so long ago. It's not even a good memory. Just trying to think about what to talk about. Well, I guess like any life, since I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I think I've made a lot of mistakes, and I guess it is true. There's a better way of saying this, but a crass way of saying this, which is just as true. You learn as much from losers as you do from winners. And it's just as important to know what not to do as it is to know what to do. And so I've made a lot of mistakes in Alcoholics Anonymous since I've been here, but there's 3 mistakes I have not made so far. I've never quit going to meetings. Well, I've never taken a drink since I quit drinking. That's foundational. I've never quit going to meetings. I've never entertained the idea that it would be all right for me to go to meetings. You know, we lose a lot of people around 3 or 4 years, and the way I explain that is we're back on information again. If you're going to meetings and you're looking to hear something new, you've probably run out at about 3 years. You're not going to hear much new. You've heard about what you're going to hear. I've always wondered about alcoholics who say they're sick of hearing the same thing. I don't know what kind of alcoholic you'd have would be in trouble with repetition. The only way you get to where you need AA, you got to keep doing the same thing. I hadn't heard this in years, but I used to hear a lot that, you know, it ain't how much you drink, it's what it does to you. And I suppose that's fair enough, but most alcoholics I've known have drank quite a bit. I don't know what kind of alcoholic you'd have that didn't drink much. Now I lost my train of thought, but it doesn't matter. I know what I wanted to say. I've never quit going to meetings. I've never drank, never quit going to meetings. I've never trusted the wrong person. As far as I know, I think this is, I've quit saying this because there's all these Middle Eastern gangs and stuff now, but I think there was a time it was probably true that I'd worked with, because of either my jobs or because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've worked with members of about every gang there is. And a very famous gang underwent, cost the city of Omaha and the taxpayers of Nebraska millions and millions of dollars. They indicted this, it's very famous, the world famous gang, they're all over the world. They indicted him for methamphetamine distribution. They brought their own mouthpiece from California, got him checked in and got him on the bar, and he hires local counsel so he don't get sabotaged. And long drawn out trial, and he walked almost all of them, cost the city of Omaha millions and millions of dollars. One guy, I think, ended up with 8 or 9 months. The rest of them all walked. Well, I knew what was going on because I knew one of those guys that was telling me all kinds of stuff I wasn't supposed to know at the time. So the one place I sponsored a guy one time who's, I think Feather remembers this, knows who it was probably. I sponsored a guy whose dad was a high-ranking official in the Aryan Nation. Local. He kept his mouth shut during a long federal prison term, and the nation took care of him and then set him up in business when he got out. So folks are all over, but there's always stuff going on. Somebody, in my experience, that's all I got here. Somebody's always giving the police information. There's some kind of stuff going on, all of this. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, we got some of that, but to the best of my knowledge, I've never had a confidence violated. If I have, I don't know it. Don't know it. What I have had is a sponsor who told his sponsor stuff. That's fair enough. I do that. If I need help, most of us do. So we've got some protection here, because if we violate it too far, when Bill Wilson talks about, you can, and it does say this, that no society on earth more safely guards the individual members' right to do whatever they want than Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're not worried about getting drunk, you can do anything you want in AA. You can. But those of us who are worried about getting drunk have some protection around us because we're connected with like-minded people. So, that's a great comfort to know that you have some place to turn. If a long time ago it became clear to me that there was no place for me to go other than Alcoholics Anonymous. So when you settle that in your heart, it makes things a lot easier to stay here. That no matter what's going on, there is no other place to go. If there is, I don't know where it would be. So I'm going to shut this off. Reed used up a lot of time. I want this to go on record here. I'm stopping at 5 minutes to 8. I've been accused of talking too long too. Not as bad as Reed has, but I have been accused of it. A member of this group, I will remain unnamed, told me that they've tried Reed at every part of that meeting. Have him talk first, second, in the middle, and last. It don't make no difference. You can't stop it. Hey, listen, I'll say this. We only beat on the people publicly in Alcoholics Anonymous we love. We denigrate people we don't like privately. I'm not saying that's good, but I sure ain't up here taking any shots at somebody I don't like. I'll assure you that. So, Reed, thank you for factoring me into this, and thank you for, I think I was the first speaker when this first speaker meeting started, whatever year that was, 20-some years ago now. Anyway, grace of God, power of Alcoholics Anonymous, thank you for my life.